soon as it shows record, you can go ahead and start.
Okay. My name is Carrie Schmidt, and today I'll be talking about my project, updating the AsSite public web mapping application. So I'm a GIS technician for AsSite, which is a geodatabase of the recorded cultural resources for the state of Arizona. Our data comes from our consortium members. So this is from different institutions around the state that at one time issued archaeological site numbers. And AsSite was developed as a way to get all of that data in one consolidated place to better help archaeologists in their work protecting cultural resources. So our members can access our data through two main applications. So this is our web mapping application and attribute search application. These are just for members that have been approved and meet certain qualifications because cultural resources is considered confidential data. There is a third application that's often forgotten about and little used, and that is our public application. So the current public application was developed to provide an overview for the potential for cultural resources. So this is providing kind of that potential without giving any specific location information. This app was designed with non-archaeological planning professionals in mind who may not have an archaeologist on staff or have yet to meet with one, but still need an indication of cultural resources in their project areas. The main layer is called the resource sensitivity layer. And this was developed taking from the Bureau of Land Management, the PLSS, Public Land Survey System grid by section and determining what % of that area is comprised of archaeological sites. So this is the current public web mapping interface. It's very outdated. I believe it hasn't been updated in at least a decade, possibly closer to 15 years. The resource sensitivity layer hasn't been updated in at least a decade. It's a bit clunky. Some of the functionality is not user intuitive. When you select a section, this is the pop-up. It just provides survey area percentage and site area percentage, as well as a somewhat hard to read pie chart. There is some search functionality. The main one is for the resource sensitivity layer. So users can search by township, range, and section. So my project goals are to update the mapping interface to a more modern and user-friendly platform. I'd also want to update the resource sensitivity layer and provide other updated layers. One aspect of this project is to take my workflow and make a Python script that will then be implemented with our weekly sync to production. So that way the resource sensitivity layer is updated on a weekly basis. I'd also like to provide additional land ownership data per section. This is really important because land ownership determines what paperwork you file, what permits you get, and what kind of regulations you need to follow. And then also maintain and add to the search functionality. So my core data, I started the same as the old layer with the PLSS layer. It comes with an area field, but we decided to subtract tribal area from this total section area because AsSite has a rule that we do not display or host data for tribal land. And this way it makes it more clear to the user that that land is not in any way a part of this data set. And from AsSite projects and archaeological sites for the resource sensitivity layer. And then also a land ownership layer, which I took from AsGeo and I believe is also published by the BLM. And I modified it to add additional division layers. So for example, if it's Forest Service, it will say what ranger district. And I also added a field to put links for additional cultural resource guidance. For generating the resource sensitivity layer, this is separate for sites and projects, but I combined it for this diagram. It just goes through a dissolve before being used and the summarize within tool with the PLSS as the input polygons. It's not in this diagram, but the resulting acre per section is then divided by the total section area and multiplied by 100 to get the percentage. To cover land ownership, I have two related tables I generated. The first one is using a spatial join to determine land ownership category per section. This way, a lot of the fields coming in from the original land ownership layer are maintained. I also did a similar process with summarize within in order to determine land ownership percentage per section. So what percentage of the total section area is comprised by those landowners. This was done doing some of the way that you can configure the summarize within tool. So resulting data layers is a new and updated resource sensitivity with 2 related tables. I also brought in some additional layers through feature service. So the original unmodified land ownership, county boundaries, city boundaries, USGS quads, and then 2 historic preservation zone layers. The first from City of Tucson and City of Phoenix. Both of these have some additional ordinances that need to be followed if your project is in those areas. So our developer took my layer and related tables and added it to a feature service that I then brought into a web map. The web map, I was able to finalize the symbology as well as customize a pop-up. I was able to make some custom arcade expressions and add graphics such as a pie chart. This web map was then brought into Web App Builder. I know there is a more updated, newer kind of platform called Experience Builder, but the main member application was just redeveloped using Web App Builder, and it was decided to kind of also do this application on the same platform. Developer Edition allows for some backend customization, so I was able to bring in some custom widgets that I found online, such as enhanced search, enhanced location, and a pop-up panel. This is a brief look at the arcade expressions. I know it's probably really small to read. The one to the left is what I use to loop through the related records per section and pull land ownership by category as well as divisions. I discovered that in Map Viewer Classic that I was unable to adequately display the link field because I believe when you bring in a URL or even HTML, the pop-up has issues parsing it. And so as a workaround, I developed another expression per land ownership type, this time by admin agencies. So for example, this one is from state agency. And if in that section's related records, if there is a match for state agency, it will display the URL. And if not, it will not display anything. So for results, this is the view of the finished application. So now I'm going to do a demo just to be sure you can see the application. Okay, thank you. So this is using what I believe is called the tabular template. It comes with typical layer list, legend. So I chose a different color scheme. So the darker the blue, the higher the percentage of site area. Users are also able to add their own shape files. And for the pop-up panel, it just allows for a larger view for the pop-up. So the custom enhanced search, I was able to configure it to search just like the current application for resource sensitivity for township, range, and section. I was also able to add in some parcel and quad to the search function. Users can also search by shape if they wanted to. It's a little bit probably wouldn't be useful for this data set, but it is available. So real quick demonstration. All right. Zoom. And so this is the custom pop-up that I developed. It displays total acres that are included for the survey for the section, percentage survey area, percentage site area, as well as the results of the custom land ownership expression. This is a good example of how the divisions can also be included. So for BLM, it shows the district office as well as the field office. And those custom link expressions are set up so looped through and there is private land, so the link is available, but there is not state land, so there's nothing here. The graphic can display percentage, private land, and BLM. So it would be ideal for users to be able to plug in their own shapefiles into this tool. However, it would take a bit more customization that's outside the scope of this project, and I think we need to do some configuration on the enterprise level as well. But it would be a really nice feature to have down the road. So another really cool widget is the enhanced locate. So I configured this to work for UTM zone 12, but users also have other options. And just zooms right there. This also includes a really cool reverse geocoding tool that gives you an address as well as coordinates. I also added in just a basic measurement tool and then the default Esri search bar where they can search for address or point of interest. Okay. So some technical limitations. One of them was not as many resource links as I was hoping to get, particularly for federal agencies. I believe this is also something that's somewhat of a problem throughout the state. As I discussed before, there was an issue displaying the hyperlinks, which was a really important part of this project, but I was able to find some way of a workaround. I also wasn't able to customize the pie chart as much as I would like. There were some ethical concerns. So currently in the current public app, all tribal land is completely cut out of the TRS layer, which results in sometimes having really small areas that if there is an archaeological site there, it becomes pretty clear, where that site is located. And if you wanted to, it wouldn't take that much effort. On the other side, sometimes there are shared sections. So a section may be half tribal, half something else. And including it in that section could give the false impression that we're displaying cultural resources on tribal land. So this is just something that we'll have to work out as we move forward with this project. Another question is if it's not sensitive enough, is that this could potentially be a really good way for bad actors, particularly those who loot archaeological sites, to find them and potentially destroy cultural resources. When reviewed with the as-site board and our user advisor committee, this was considered a good enough scale, but we're going to have to just keep an eye on if any developments in the future. So future developments, there is something called a government consultation website that is being developed to kind of provide not just guidance, but also contact links. So say you know what specific district you're in, but you don't know who to contact, this will be a good way to have that information. And as that's being redeveloped, I'd like to plug it into the public app. I'd also like to add a field that says % surveyed in the last decade. Oftentimes, if you're in your project area, it has not been surveyed in the last decade, you are required to resurvey. I'd also like to develop more with Arcade. It has a lot more geoprocessing capabilities than I was aware of. So that's something that could, instead of being done prior to bringing in the layers to the web map, just directly in the web map. I'd also like to potentially maybe build a custom widget from scratch. And then eventually, as Web App Builder is being retired, there will be an eventual migration to Esri Experience Builder. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. And I'll take any questions.